Hey guys, what's good? CyberMage here, and in this video, we're going to be talking about AS-REQ roasting attack. I'm going to be making sure to go through all of this thoroughly, quickly, and I'll also be providing different commands for different types of attack scenarios. This could be from an unauthenticated or authenticated session, or from a Linux host or a Windows host, and you can add that to your methodology. So first of all, we'll have to explain the whole Kerberos authentication process quite briefly. For the AS-REQ roasting attack, the main type of packets that we're going to focus on is the first two, but nevertheless explain the whole type of authentication process. We'll just put all the pieces together for it all to make more better sense. So in this case, a user wants to access a service, and in this case, it's the MS SQL service. It could be any service in general. To do that, it needs to present the service with a TGS, which is the ticket granting service ticket. And to gain this TGS, it will need to communicate with the domain controller, or a part of the domain controller called the key distribution center. The user will enter its username and password, and it's going to make the first request over here, which is the AS request, which is to request a TGT, which is the ticket granting ticket. So it's going to request that, and with the username and password, the key distribution center is going to perform algorithms and verify that the user's entered password is the actual password or the correct password. The KDC, or the key distribution center, will then respond with the TGT in the AS-REQ packet in number 2. So the TGT again is the ticket granting ticket. It's going to send it to the user. The user can then use this to request a TGS. It will present the TGT to request the TGS from the key distribution center in the third packet. And in the fourth packet, the key distribution center will respond with the TGS, the ticket granting service. This ticket granting service can then be used to request access to that specific service, not to all service, but just that specific service. And the service will then respond to whether it's authenticated and so on. So yeah, now performing this for packet exchange is for every single service is quite a lot. So what happens now is that once the user has the TGT for any other service that it wants to access, it can just request a TGS for that specific service again. So we'll start off with the third packet over here, and it doesn't need to do the first two anymore. So the TGT can be used to request a TGS for any type of service that the user wants to access. So that is pretty much it. A brief overview of the Kerberos authentication. Let's go on to a bit more detail with number one and number 2 packets that are being sent. So first, the AS request packet. So in the default configuration, the KDC, which is the key distribution center, requires proof of identity before handing anything over. And this is us as the user. We're going to enter the username and password, right? So we're trying to verify ourselves. The KDC just requires proof. The client is going to send the AS request packet. This AS request packet is going to be encrypting a timestamp portion of this packet, and it's going to be encrypting it with a key which is derived from the user's password. So in other words, the user's password that we enter is going to be used to create a key, and that key is going to be encrypting the timestamp. The domain controller has all the passwords already stored in it. So what the domain controller is going to do is it's going to create the same key and then decrypt the timestamp. And if the decryption works out, the domain controller, or KDC, has confirmed that the user's entered password is correct. And then the KDC will respond with the AS reply packet. So, yeah, AS reply packet. Response or AS reply. And yeah, AS response. In this case, AS response packet. AS reply. Well, it doesn't make a difference. So in the AS reply packet, there is a portion of data which is encrypted with the key that's also derived from the user's password. So once again, a user's password is used to create a key, and that key encrypts a certain portion of data within that packet. Now, this ChatGPT summarizes it pretty well over here in this line, or in this sentence. So I'll just repeat what ChatGPT says. An attacker who gets the AS response packet can offline guess passwords. So for every password in our word list, right, when we're going to be trying to crack it using hashcat, for every password in the word list, it's going to derive a key, and that key is going to be used to decrypt the encrypted part of that packet. If the decryption works out and it looks like a valid Kerberos structure, then the password is correct. So that's basically what is going on. So now we're going to explain this in a bit more detail, more practical sense. We're going to perform Kerberos authentication, and we're going to see the uh, AS-REQ packet in Wireshark and show the encrypted timestamp portion of it. We're then going to be talking about the AS-REQ roasting attack and which configuration change needs to be made and how you would, then abuse that attack. So let's go ahead and go to our Kali box. I'm going to open up Wireshark. And right over here, we're performing Kerberos authentication over here. We're just going to enter our password. And I'm just going to make sure that this is on ETH0. And we're just going to press enter here. And it says authenticated to Kerberos version 5. Perfect. So if you scroll up, we see over here, there's an AS-REQ packet. And then following up, there's an AS-reply packet from the domain controller's IP, which is the .10. So over here, the AS-REQ packet that we sent, if you go to Kerberos section over here, the AS-REQ PA data, it contains 3 items, and one of them, which is the encrypted timestamp portion of it. So it's basically the password is used to create a key, and that key is then used to encrypt this timestamp. When we're performing the AS-REQ roasting attack or the user vulnerable to that type of attack, you're not going to find this data portion in there. So yeah, that is pretty much it. We talked about the default configuration, the Kerberos authentication part, and this type of PA data that contains in the AS-REQ packet. Now we're going to talk about what happens when this type of authentication is disabled. So for AS-REQ roasting attack to be possible, what happens is that certain users do not require Kerberos authentication to take place. So the specific configuration name is Kerberos pre-authentication, right? So with that disabled, we can automatically request a TGT for those users, and there's no need for the KDC to perform any type of validation or any type of check that the user is the actual user requesting the TGT, and we will receive automatically the AS response packet from the KDC, and we could just start cracking it offline then. And that is pretty much it. We're going to now go to our domain controller, create a user that is vulnerable to that type of attack, and it'll all make sense in a bit. So we can go ahead and close this now. Let's go to our domain controller. So over here, we're just going to go to Tools, Users and Computers. And as you can see over here, this Ali Mian user, which is my name, this is the user that we were authenticating with over here. Let's create another user now. So user, let's name this victim or test, and let's call this victim. We can click next. Oops. Yep. Password never expires. Windows 1, just keeping a brief password. Next, and we have now created that user. Now this user is not vulnerable to AS-REQ roasting attack yet, but if we go to properties here, and then we go to account, we have account options over here. If we scroll all the way down to the very bottom, there's an option that says do not require Kerberos pre-authentication. So the process that's performed here is Kerberos pre-authentication, and what we're going to do is we are going to disable pre-authentication, do not require, or enable to disable Kerberos pre-authentication. So we're enabling the do not require Kerberos pre-authentication. So just click apply, click OK, and there we go. So now this user is vulnerable to that. So now let's try to exploit this first, and then we're going to get to more of the commands later on. I'm going to open up Wireshark, go to ETH0, and I am going to go to attacking over here and just copying this command here. And this is just for demonstration. I'm going to explain the commands in a bit. So the first thing to do is if we are in an unauthenticated session, right, we need to know the SAM username or the username for those users that we want to target. We would just go online and find something that's more likely or a common name that works out, a common format of the company. And and try it that way. So in this case, I'm creating a file over here called final.txt, and I just put some usernames over here. I'm also going to add ali.mien. I believe that's the username that I used. Let me just check. Yep, ali.mien. And we added the ali.mien and the victim user as well, and a couple of other usernames. We can just add it, maybe format it a bit better, honestly, for it to make more sense. Let's go with J Morgan, Sam Smith. Let's see. Yeah, I'm kind of out of names right now. But yeah, that's good enough. So let's go ahead and now copy this and paste it over here. And we're running this tool called impacket get mp users. We're going to use no passwords. We're going to do users file.txt, and this is our domain. And there's probably a bunch of gibberish over here. So I'm just going to do this and restart it. We can click enter, and there we go. For the first user, it did not find anything. For the second user, it didn't find anything. For the third, it did find something over here, the response, Kerberos AS-REQ packet. And yeah, and then for the fourth, which we have over here, it did not find anything. So now let's go over here and check this out. So we have an AS-REQ over here. Oops, should have clicked that. AS-REQ. If we go to Kerberos, oh, sorry, this is the AS. Yeah, request. Perfect. And we can go to PA data. It only has one item now, while the other one had 3. And it just has none of the timestamp encrypted portion in this. So that's kind of what's happening. The tool is automatically making this request with every single username that exists, and it's going to use, the PA pack request, and it's going to wait for a response from the server. And if it responds, which in this case it did eventually, let's go ahead and look for that. Let's see now. Yeah, right over here. No, wait. That's the request. It may not have picked it up. No worries. Or we cannot find it. Maybe that's what's happening. Okay, perfect. This is it. Yeah. So for some of them, obviously, it's saying that principal unknown. It cannot find it for some of those requests. But for this one, this is the exact one that we sent it with, right? So PA data contains one item right over here. This did get a response, and it contains the encrypted part over here, which starts with C72B80. So we can just use C72 over here. And in our packet that we found, it's C72B80. So yeah, same thing over here. We just got the encrypted part. Now, that is pretty much it. That is kind of the attack. With this configuration set, with this property set to these users, right over here, account, scroll to the bottom, do not require Kerberos pre-authentication. If this is enabled, those users are vulnerable to this type of attack. Now let's talk about those attack situations that we can encounter. First, we'll talk about the unauthenticated situation. So let's go ahead and look at that. From an unauthenticated situation, I would use impacket and get NP users, and we would just use a list of usernames in a file and then run it with the domain controller over here. And the other tool you can use is Kerberos. I don't have this installed currently, but you can use that as well. Both are amazing tools. So yeah, that is pretty much it. This is from an unauthenticated session. You would just try your luck on any of the usernames that you find. You would use a word list online. There's probably some in SecList as well, or a statistically likely list of username. And in a CTF environment, you could say that, hey, or in any, even a client environment, say you find a username format and it's following a format as first name dot last name, for example, all the bunch of names that you find, convert it to this type of format and just run this tool with it. That is pretty much it. So that's from an unauthenticated viewpoint. From an authenticated session, since we can now query the Active Directory environment, you can run something like this. So in this case, in packet get NP users, we implement the domain controller's IP, we request it, and we're going to output that to a file, the things that we find over here, and we're going to use this username over here. Since we can now query the Active Directory domain environment, we're automatically going to get every users that have this set. So if we run this command, it's going to ask us for a password. Let's go ahead and enter this password. And it's going to automatically find us a user that has that enabled and get this for them. Now, the other way we can do it is, say we're on an Active Directory environment, we can then run this command over here. Just going to copy, go over here. And if we paste this over here and it's looking for this type of setting for a user account, and we just click enter, we can see that the name is victim test and the SAM account is name. So this is a quick way of finding which users has this this configuration set. So it's good if you're trying to like audit your environment. Another way is you can use Rubius. So if you are on a Windows host, so this host right now is connected to the AD environment. So let's go ahead and find where this tool is, honestly. Oops. I think it's in downloads. No, okay. That is weird. Do. Give me 1 second. It should have been here. I'm going to pause the video and make sure I get this tool on here. All right, we are back. So apparently the antivirus kind of like removed it from the machine. Well, so yeah, we can just do this command over here. Let me just copy that again. And voila, since we are connected to the Active Directory environment, we are in an authenticated session, we can just run this command over here and it will automatically find every user that has this setting enabled. We can also, if we don't want to target every single user, which the last command over here does, we can target a specific user such as this. And in this case, we're just putting the user victim, the username, and click enter. And it's going to go ahead and just target that one user. So yeah, these are just some ways that you can do it. Just want to give it to you guys. And another way is that, for example, if you have permissions, if you are some type of user and your permissions allow you to modify another user's setting, you can enable that do not use Kerberos pre-authentication. You could enable that and then try to crack that new user's password. So that's just another tip out there. So if you have that permission, you could use Bloodhound or whatever to also check for AS-REQ roasting attacks and to see if you have permissions to change or modify anything for a user, right? Like generic write or stuff like that. For our defensive measure, you can monitor for any disabling of Kerberos pre-authentication. Yeah, monitor for disabling for pre-authentication, and you would look for event IDs such as 4738, which is just logs which represent changes to the user's settings. So yeah, that is pretty much it. The main thing for this attack to work is for the Kerberos pre-authentication to be disabled. And yeah, that is pretty much it. Where is that user, bro? Where's that victim user that we made? Refresh. Here it is. Account. Yep. So if we enable the do not require Kerberos pre-authentication, it makes this user vulnerable to AS-REQ roasting attack. Now, before I actually leave, let's talk about cracking the password. So the main thing that I usually use in Hashcat is Hashcat. So let's just take one of this over here. Let's copy this and let's put this somewhere and into a file called hash. Let's paste this in here. Click enter. Yep. And I'm going to remove this now. So we have it in a file called hash. All we have to do now is we can just run this command over here. Sudo hashcat, and the mode is 8 200. We can change this to hash. We don't need to use any rules or to do for, so we can remove all of this and let's see what happens. It's going to go ahead and it's going to crack the password, and the password is Windows 1 with a W, beginning letter as a capital. That is pretty much it. So yeah, take care guys, and I'll see you for the next video.